Rentals and flips are the common way people know how to get into property. But you need to stick around to see our 3 power tips on how to maximize investments in properties, especially if you've got a low budget. We've got a tip called regs, and then the 2 power ones are subdividing and rezoning, which are not commonly talked about. And rezoning is a super way to get into property if you don't want to be hands-on. Hi guys, I'm Dave Hayward from Hayward Properties, and we're here to pull back the veil on the mysteries of property, investing, and maximizing profit in property. Rentals. Buying a rental property is most probably the most common way to get into property. But here are some tips and tricks on when you buy an investment property like this. A rental property is something where you're going to put a tenant in and they're going to end up paying 60 or 70% of your bond off by being in there. What people don't realize is that rentals slowly increase over the years, and annually you have an increase. But your bond pretty much stays the same unless we get a bond hike. And that might go up and down a little bit, but it pretty much stays steady. So over time, your rental starts to perform better and better and pay off your property quicker and quicker. So when buying a rental property, you need to look at the costs of your property. So everybody wants to buy a house off plan or a townhouse off plan, thinking that's the best way to buy because all your costs are included. But it's not always the best way. You need to be looking at things like, what is the levy in the complex? What is the average rental in that complex? And what are your rates? Because those costs are going to come off first. So if you're going to look at a property, look at something that gives you a better return with lower costs, and then also consider freestanding houses. A lot of people are worried about the maintenance and the care on a freestanding house, and they think it's a better investment to buy a townhouse. But actually, the return on a freestanding house is much better. You only have your rates to cover and the building insurance. The tenant is going to pay their own contents insurance, which is the expensive part of the insurance. And a house for, say, R1 million will get you a rental closer to 10,000 Rand, whereas a townhouse of that might get you 8,000 or 9,000 Rand rental, and you're going to have the extra costs of the levies, which you wouldn't have had in a freestanding property. Flips. So, flips is a tricky game, but what you need to look for, and here are some of the best tips I think, are look for cheaper properties that need work. A house that's already done up, it's going to be hard to add value to. You also want to look for a house that's selling below the average of an area. So if an area sells for an average of 1.5 million, you want to buy a house that's going to be 800 to maybe R1 million, and that you can spend a little bit of money on improving and adding value, so that when you resell it, you can get the average of the area or a bit higher because you've added that extra. Like the bathrooms, kitchens, things like that are the quickest way to add value in a property. So when you're looking for flip properties, the best thing to do is to chat to your agent. We often get people coming to us saying, where can we buy? What should we buy? Your agent knows the areas, they know where you can add value, and they know what you're going to be able to sell that property for if you invest money there. You also don't want to go in with an idea of fixing up and spending a lot of money, perhaps let's say on a kitchen, when if you just painted or put granite tops on, something like that would add a lot of value and not a lot of expense. The agent is going to guide you in that. So trust your agent, and now let's go on to regs. So the first of our 3 unspoken ways to get into property is regs, which stands for Real Estate Investment Groups. So this is a great way to get into property if you don't have a lot of money. You can get a company started, or 3 or 4 of your mates, and invest in a property. So if you want to buy a property for 2 million Rand and you don't have that kind of money, now you could each put in 500,000 Rand, split up the costs, and get into the property. You would obviously also share the profits in that. Regs is a great way to get into long-term rental investment properties, or to go into flips, and our 2 power tips obviously being subdividing and rezoning. Another way to get into regs is to go online and have a look. There are already groups that are online that you can join for a little bit of money and get into the property market. Obviously they split up the profits in that again, so you're not going to necessarily make as much, but the best time, as always, that I tell you in property to start is now. Subdividing, our first power tip. So not a lot of people look at that, but when you're looking to invest in a property and you want to maximize your value, A great thing to do is look at a property that has a bigger stand or the house placed in such a situation that you can then subdivide off a piece of the land. This gives you many opportunities now because you could subdivide the land and still rent out the house. You can then sell that extra piece of property or build an additional property on there. The other option is to sell that front property, and you'll be surprised. Once you've subdivided that land, often you can still get almost what you paid for that property back, even after the subdivision. And if you're going in the form of a flip and you've bought an older house, you can first do your renovations, then flip that piece, and then sell off the extra piece of land, or again, build another property and then sell it or rent it out. So subdividing is a great way to really maximize value on a property. And now, our power tip, rezoning. A lot of people don't know about this, but if you can find a residential property on a busy street or in a popular area where the guys are changing houses into offices and commercial properties, that is a great place to invest. Buy the property, you're going to spend a little bit of money on getting the rezoning, but now the property is worth more because most people don't want to go through the hassle of getting a rezoning done. You do the rezoning, sell the property, you'll get a much better return on it as a commercial property, but there are so many options because you've got the flips, you've got regs, and you've got the subdividing, and then you can also look at the rental option, because if you take a residential property and you rezone it to a commercial and you set it up as an office, you may spend a little bit of money on the maintenance and the kind of getting the property right for an office environment, but it's not a big expense. You can then rent that property out for almost double what you could as a residential property because the rand square meter price of commercial property is much higher. You can easily take a house, chop it up into three. You're not rezoning or splitting the property or subdividing it. So it's not like if you wanted to turn it into a residential property and you need to section title off all these things. You can just put up drywalls and have 2 or 3 offices on one house and rent those out to 3 different businesses. That gives you a stable income because you've got three different businesses paying your rent. So if one is battling and the guys can't pay the rent, you've still got 2 other income streams coming in. And again, you're getting a much higher rental per square meter than you would on a residential property. The other tip with rezoning to commercial is that it's not a hands-on process. You go through the rezoning and you can sell the property, but even renting, businesses aren't like houses. People aren't as pedantic about stuff. The guys get in, they're running their business, they know what they need to do, and they carry on with it. Often if there's small things that need fixing, they don't even bother to pick up the phone and phone the landlord, where a residential tenant might phone you for every little thing. A lock is jammed, there's a leak in the sink. In a commercial environment, guys don't have time for that. So they'll often just sort it out themselves. So for me, one of the best ways to get into property and get a great return is to go find that house, rezone it to commercial and rent it out as offices to somebody. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all the tips and things that are going to come out to you soon. See you guys on the next video.